Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another Commander's Guild deck tech for you. This is deck number 235 and it's titled Don't Worry, My Deck Can't Even Do Combat Damage. And if you haven't seen the show before, what we're doing is randomly selecting a card from scryfall.com or from among suggested cards, working with a budget of $100 or less and building a Commander deck for Magic the Gathering around a theme of the chosen card. So this week, our random card was suggested to us by Switch Banka over on Reddit, and that card is the Mindskinner. And the Mindskinner is blue, blue, blue for a 10-1 legendary enchantment creature nightmare. The Mindskinner can't be blocked, and if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage, and each opponent mills that many cards. So in essence, this is a 10-1 that is unblockable, that can get in and every time it deals damage, or quote-unquote, deals damage, it's actually going to be milling each of our opponents for 10. So this is a very powerful card, and obviously, since it is a legendary creature and can be our commander, it is, of course, our commander for this week. So we are mono blue, built around a 10 power creature that can't actually do damage and also wants to mill our opponents. So that is a very unique build around that we want to really focus in on. And so let's jump into some of our themes for this week and talk a little bit about how this deck is intended to function. Starting off, our first major theme is actually going to be Voltron. We want to make the Mindskinner as big as possible, so that way whenever we attack, and considering it's unblockable, we can just kind of smack our opponents, or I suppose in this case their libraries, by milling them for a ton of cards at a time. And granted, 10 is already quite a bit with the Mindskinner, that's 10% of our opponent's decks, but we can make it even more with cards like Black Blade Reforged, which is 2 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control, equip legendary creature for 3, and equip for 7. So in theory, if we can get the Mindskinner down on turn 3, say we've played Black Blade on turn 2, we then play a land on turn 4 and equip the Black Blade. So even with just 4 lands, we've now increased our mill potential from 10 to 14. And that's only going to increase as the game goes on. Plus, if we start stacking up a bunch of other equipments, then we can definitely make Mindskinner a force to be reckoned with. Moving on to our next theme is kind of piggybacking off this first theme of having so many equipments and so many things that trigger for Voltron. We also have cards that care about casting non-creature spells. We're very, very limited in the number of creatures we play in this deck because we really are kind of all in on the Mindskinner. So we need ways to make other creatures to protect ourselves when we want to be swinging with our commander with a little bit of reckless abandon. And a great way we can do that is with Shark Typhoon, which is 5 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. Then it has cycling for X, 1 and a blue, and when you cycle it, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So in other words, if we can stick this on 6, then we can start casting a ton of our equipments and then start beating people down with the Mindskinner, knowing that every time we play an equipment, we're actually making a flying shark that we can then use to block, or because Mindskinner does prevent all damage we would deal, we can then keep increasing our mill potential by swinging with the sharks as well. So it's a great card that plays both defensively and offensively in the deck, and kind of helps us shore up some of our weaknesses. And then last but not least, we come to our third theme, which is rewarding ourselves for milling our opponents. And not in the traditional way, we're not running cards that particularly care about how many cards are in our opponent's graveyards, but we're playing cards like Reenact the Crime, which is 1 blue, blue, blue for an instant that says exile target non-land card in a graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn. Copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. This essentially allows us to cast anything that gets put into the graveyard from anywhere for only 4 mana. So if we hit someone with the Mindskinner and all 3 of our opponents mill 10 cards, we are now looking at 30 total cards that were put into the graveyard this turn, and Reenact the Crime is probably going to have at least one good target from among those, meaning we can very easily steal our opponent's best things, maybe their value engines, card draw, whatever, and give it to ourselves so that we can keep kind of churning through our own deck and hitting them with Mindskinner while still having whatever they gave us to advance our own game plan. Anyway though, those are all of our themes for this week, and the next thing I want to do is take a look at some key cards in the deck. And these are cards that really synergize with what the deck is trying to do, and in a lot of cases are win conditions or value engines all on their own. So first up, we have River Churn Monument, which is 1 and a blue for an artifact. You can pay 1, tap it, and any number of target players each mill 2 cards. Then it also has Exhaust for 2 blue. You can tap it, and any number of target players each mill cards equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. Now, this doesn't seem like it's going to be super effective when you consider we're milling people for, say, 10 a turn. It would take us 5 or so turns of swinging with the Mindskinner to be able to mill everybody for their entire library. But you also have to keep in mind that we have things like Blackblade Reforged. We've got ways to pump up the Mindskinner's power. We have ways to give it double strike. We have ways to make sure that we are milling a significantly more amount of cards than our opponents expect us to. And if we can do that, then we can drop the River Churn Monument and just empty everyone's libraries kind of at a moment's notice. So River Churn Monument is one of the most efficient win conditions we have because it can kind of just end the game out of nowhere. Moving on though, to our second key card. This one is going to be Leyline Axe. So I just mentioned that we have ways to give double strike. One of the most efficient and probably one of the best is Leyline Axe because it's 4 mana for an artifact equipment that if it's in our opening hand, we may begin the game with it on the battlefield. It's going to be very unlikely that that happens, given the fact that we are technically playing with a 100 card singleton deck, but it's not a 0% chance. And equipped creature gets +1/+1, double strike, and trample, and then it equips for 3. So being able to give Mindskinner +1/+1 and double strike, trample is mostly irrelevant considering it's unblockable, that then means it's hitting for 11 twice. So every single turn, we are milling the entire table for 22 cards each. And that is on top of any other buffs we may have. All we have to do is essentially hit twice with the Leyline Axe equipped, and then we can River Churn Monument the table out of the game. So there are a couple of ways that this deck can very quickly and very efficiently mill out the table, but it is worth noting that they all do revolve around the Mindskinner. And then finally, last but not least, our final key card for this week is going to be Mirelurk Queen. And Mirelurk Queen is 4 and a blue for a 4/4 crab mutant. It has vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 rad counters, and whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, draw a card, then put a +1/+1 counter on Mirelurk Queen. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is one of those cards that I didn't think too much of when I put it into the deck. It seemed okay. Target player gets 2 rad counters. Honestly, it doesn't matter who gets that. But the fact that it triggers on any form of mill, not just rad counter mill, means that there is a very good chance we can get this to trigger at least once a turn. Well, exactly once a turn. And then being able to put a counter on it means it's going to slowly become more and more of a threat. With vigilance means it's a great blocker. It's milling if we have the Mindskinner in play. And we're drawing cards, which is exactly what we want to be doing in mono blue anyway. So Mirelurk Queen really kind of just hits all the marks for what we want for this deck, and I'm very happy that I was able to find a way to play a Fallout card in this deck because I absolutely love Fallout, so I'll find an excuse to do that. Anyway though, those are all of our key cards for this week, and the next thing I want to do is take a look at some cool interactions in the deck. And these are cards that synergize well with each other, but in a lot of cases are just fun cards that I want to highlight. So starting off, our first pair of cards I want to talk about is Imperial Plate and Flow of Ideas. So Imperial Plate, another very good equipment for this deck, honestly one of the best considering we're mono blue. It is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand, then it equips for 2. So because we're mono blue, we are very likely going to be having a full grip of cards at any given time, meaning we can give the Mindskinner +7/+7 and hit for 17. Then maybe we equip something like Leyline Axe, we hit for 18 twice a turn, and we're milling for 36 every single turn. It gets out of hand very, very quickly. But one of the best ways to ensure that we have a full hand of cards is Flow of Ideas, because Flow of Ideas is 5 and a blue for a sorcery that simply says draw a card for each island you control. Now, again, because we are mono blue, because our commander requires 3 blue pips to cast, we are very, very heavy on the basic islands in this deck. There's a couple of non-basics floating around, but for the most part, we have almost entirely an island-based mana base. And because of that, that means Flow of Ideas, if we just hit our land drop every single turn, is a 6 mana draw 6. And that's just assuming we cast it on curve and not wait until we have even more islands. And if we can get it to, say, maybe we have 7 cards in hand, we draw another 7, but we of course go down the Flow of Ideas, we're now at 13 cards in hand. We're giving the Mindskinner +13. It's now hitting for 23. Maybe we can double it up. We're swinging for almost 50 milled cards a turn. And then Riverchurn Monument just ends the game right there. So this is a very powerful combination of cards, particularly for Mindskinner. And I think this is actually a very good combo of cards to put in any mono blue Voltron deck. Moving on, though, to our next pair of cards for our cool interactions. In this case, we have Chrome Host Seed Shark and Shimmer Dragon. 2 of the few creatures in the deck. Chrome Host Seed Shark is 2 and a blue for a 2/4 Phyrexian Shark. It has flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, incubate X, where X is that spell's mana value. So we essentially can make an artifact token with X +1/+1 counters on it, and then we can pay 2 and turn it into a creature. Why that's relevant is because of Shimmer Dragon, which is 4 blue for a 5/6 dragon with flying. As long as you control 4 or more artifacts, Shimmer Dragon has hexproof. That'll probably be the case given all of our equipment. And tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, draw a card. So with Chrome Host Seed Shark, we are making a ton of incubate tokens, so we're making 1 every single time we cast another different artifact, or an enchantment, instant, sorcery, whatever, and then we can use Shimmer Dragon to tap the incubate tokens that the Chrome Host is making, and then hopefully draw into more things we can cast to then make more incubate tokens, and then tap those to once again draw more cards. So both of these combined create an engine that is very difficult for our opponents to deal with, given the fact that, once again, we are mono blue, we have counterspells, we have ways to protect our permanents and interact with the board, but Shimmer Dragon's going to have hexproof, and most of the time, our opponents aren't going to want to spend a removal spell on the Seed Shark, because it is just a 2/4 flyer that, yes, while it's spitting out tokens, is by no means the biggest threat in our deck. So this is definitely an interaction that's worth mentioning, and one that I wanted to make sure to highlight. Anyway though, that brings us to the end of our cool interactions for the week. And the final piece of our deck tech is of course to talk about the price of the deck. And this week, our total deck price came in at $85.65, with the most expensive card in the deck being a former game changer, which is no longer a game changer, Urza Lord High Artificer. And Urza is 2 blue for a 1/4 legendary creature human artificer. When Urza enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Then you can tap an untapped artifact you control to add blue, and pay 5, shuffle your library, then exile the top card. Until the end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. So there is a lot of words on this card, but it is very deserving of the almost $12 price tag that it holds, because if we are playing a ton of equipments in this deck, we don't really have a use for them when it comes to tapping, but Urza can tap them to make blue mana, essentially turning all of our equipments into mana rocks, as well as ways for us to Voltron up the Mindskinner and win the game. Plus, Urza itself is going to be giving us some free value, that 5 mana ability, and that 0/0 construct that is going to probably get pretty big, can also be swinging in and milling people with the Mindskinner. So overall, I think Urza is a very powerful card for this deck. However, if you did want to trim a little bit on the budget of the deck, you could cut out Urza. I also know that Urza is a little bit of a tricky card to include because, as I mentioned, even though it's not currently a game changer, it certainly was at one point. So putting it in can kind of lead to some feel-bad moments for your opponents, so do be aware of that. On the other hand, though, if you're looking for a card to put into the deck that's a little bit outside of our budget range, I do have a suggestion for you there as well. And I feel like this is a card that I have suggested before, but considering it is still insanely expensive, I will continue to suggest it until it gets a very good reprint, and that is Bruvak the Grandiloquent, which is a massive $38.20 for none other than a 2 and a blue, 1/4 legendary creature human advisor. If an opponent would mill one or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. Now, this is one of those cards that I wish I could put into every single mill deck because it is just that powerful. But like I said, it is unfortunately almost $40, so it is way outside of our budget range. But being able to turn the Mindskinner from milling 10 a turn to milling 20, and if we have double strike, milling 20 into milling 40, Bruvak ends games very, very quickly if mill is our primary game plan. Now, with that being said though, if we are putting in a card like Bruvak, we do have to take a card out of the deck as well. And the card I would recommend taking out is Rune Chanter's Pike, which is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets first strike and gets +X/+O, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, then it equips for 2. Now, this is a card that is very powerful, and I do think it's very good in the right deck. However, because we're not specifically built around instants and sorceries, there's a very good chance that when we go to equip this to our commander, we're getting +2, +3, maybe +4. And while that's not terrible, getting a 14 power mill creature instead of a 10 power mill creature is a very good improvement. It's not nearly as efficient at milling as Bruvak is, so I would highly recommend Bruvak over Rune Chanter's Pike if money is no issue for the budget. However, Rune Chanter's Pike, still not a terrible card either way. That, though, brings us to the end of our deck tech for today. And before we jump into a game with this deck, I want to take a quick second to highlight some of our patrons and channel members and give a massive shout out to everyone who supports the channel, whether you're just liking the video, subscribing to the channel, leaving comments, offering suggestions, and of course, being part of our patron and channel member crew. So, with all of that said, thank you once again for everyone for being involved. I really do appreciate all of you, and I genuinely look forward to all of the interactions we have every week. So, thank you again. But with that being said, let's jump into a game this week and see how our milling Mindskinner can work. So, today, we are joined by 3 opponents, of course, playing 3 commanders, and they are Mort playing Falco Spara Pact Weaver, Cole playing Yuma Proud Protector, and Luke playing Marchesa the Black Rose. Starting off with Mort and his Falco Spara deck, this is actually a Saga deck, but even more specifically, a Summons deck. Because the way that Falco Spara works is you can remove a counter from a creature you control to cast spells from the top of your library. So if you can remove a lore counter from a summon creature, which is a saga, you can actually keep those sagas around longer and then also continuously trigger their abilities while casting the top card of your library. And I think that that is a super, super cool idea, and Mort's kind of been tinkering around with it for a while. He dropped some links into the Discord that we have about all of the different ways he's put it together. So I am super excited to see what he's got for this one because it sounds so cool, and I'm very excited to see how it functions. Next up, we have Cole and his Yuma deck, and this is a deck that is almost entirely the precon. He mentioned he changed about 10 to 15 cards, so almost entirely the precon with some nice upgrades. And this is a deck that I am definitely very concerned about because I love deserts in Commander. Honestly, I don't know if you can find someone who likes playing deserts in Commander more than me, and so I am very well aware of the power that deserts have in the game of Commander, and if you have a commander that's fully built around deserts, I have no doubt that there are some very powerful things that this deck can do. And of course, being in the Naya colors, there's probably some tokens, there's probably some massive creatures, so I am very concerned about this one. And last but not least, we have Luke playing Marchesa the Black Rose. And this is a deck that not only has been on the channel before, but is actually a deck that I built for the channel quite a few years ago now. Luke is one of our oldest supporters, and I genuinely appreciate all of the support that he's given to the channel. He's become a pretty good friend in that time. But he is someone that requested a deck to be built around the Wretched, which then eventually turned into this Marchesa deck. So if you haven't seen that deck tech, do go check it out. I'm a huge fan of this deck. But essentially the goal is to steal your opponent's creatures, put +1/+1 counters on them, and then let them die and return them to the battlefield with Marchesa. So this is definitely a big concern for me because if he can steal our Mindskinner, then we kind of don't have a lot of great ways to win. We still have a couple of things here and there, and we could Voltron up some of our other creatures, but we really want to have the Mindskinner. So I think overall, that is probably the deck that I am actually the most concerned about at the table, which, considering I built it and do know all of the cards in it, is kind of a wild thing to say, and I don't want to, hype myself up, but I do think it's a very good deck, and I think it's going to be a big problem for our game plan this week. Otherwise, though, please let me know down in the comments what you think. Give those predictions. Let's see who's going to walk out the winner. And as always, if you have any suggestions for future decks you would like to see me build around, please let me know that as well. But with all that being said, let's jump into this game, and I will talk to you all once it's done. At the start of the game, Mort goes first, followed by Cole, Luke, and then myself. On Mort's first turn, he plays a command tower and casts Crystal Fragments. Cole casts a Zurin Orb, allowing him to sacrifice a land to gain 2 life, then plays a Conduit Pylons, surveilling 1. Luke plays a Crumbling Necropolis. I play an island. Mort plays a Tangle Span Bridgeworks. Cole plays a forest. Luke plays a Swiftwater Cliffs, gaining a life. I play an island and cast River Churn Monument, which can be activated for 1 mana to mill any number of players for 2, or activated for 4 mana to mill any number of target players equal to the number of cards in their graveyards, but only once per game. Mort plays a Flooded Grove and casts Evolution Witness, which has Adapt 2, and whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on it, he returns a permanent from his graveyard to his hand. Cole plays a forest and casts Springbloom Druid, sacrificing a forest to search his library for 2 basic lands, putting them into play tapped. Luke plays an Evolving Wilds, immediately sacrificing it to search his library for a basic land, putting it into play tapped. I play an island and cast my commander, the Mindskinner, which can't be blocked and prevents all combat damage my creatures would deal, but instead mills each opponent equal to the damage prevented this way. Mort plays a Witch Blessed Meadow, paying 3 life so it comes into play untapped, and casts his commander, Falco Spara Pact Weaver, entering with a shield counter, letting him look at the top card of his library, and letting him cast the top card of his library by removing a counter from a creature he controls, in addition to paying the spell's other costs. Finally, he attacks me for 2 with Evolution Witness. Cole cast Hazazon, Shaper of Sand, now letting him play deserts from his graveyard, and creating 2 1/1 Sand Warrior tokens when a desert enters under his control. After that, he plays a Chef at Dunes and makes 2 Sand Warriors. On Luke's turn, he simply plays a mountain and passes. I play an island and attack Mort for 10 with Mindskinner, but before damage, Luke casts Chaos Warp, shuffling my commander into my deck, although I put it into the command zone instead. Then I reveal the top card of my library, putting it into play if it's a permanent, which it is, so I put an island into play. This allows me to recast my commander, the Mindskinner, in my second main phase. Mort plays an island and casts Summon Ixion, triggering its first lore counter ability, exiling my Mindskinner until the saga leaves the battlefield. After that, he attacks Luke for 2 with the Witness, and attacks Cole for 3 with Falco. In his second main phase, Mort equips the Crystal Fragments to summon Ixion, giving it +1/+1, then passes. Cole cast a Dune Chanter, turning all his lands into deserts, and letting them tap for any color of mana. Then he plays a Jungle Shrine, making 2 more Sand Warrior tokens since it's now a desert, and attacks me for 3 with Hazazon. Luke plays a swamp and casts his commander, Marchesa the Black Rose, giving all of his creatures Dethrone, and, in each end step, returning any creatures that died under his control to the battlefield if they had a +1/+1 counter on them. On my turn, I simply untap and pass. In Mort's first main phase, Summon Ixion moves to its second chapter, putting a +1/+1 counter on itself and Falco, also letting him gain 2 life. Then he removes a counter from Summon Ixion to cast Arcane Signet from the top of his library, and also casts Enduring Curiosity, now letting him draw a card whenever a creature he controls deals combat damage to an opponent. After that, he attacks me for 2 with the Witness, attacks Cole for 4 with Falco, and attacks Luke for 4 with Summon Ixion, drawing 3 cards when they all deal combat damage. Then, in Mort's second main phase, he plays a Forest and passes. On Cole's turn, he moves straight to combat, attacking Mort with Hazazon and all 4 of his Sand Warriors for 7 total damage. However, Mort blocks with Enduring Curiosity, killing Hazazon and the Curiosity, returning the Curiosity to the battlefield as an enchantment, then Mort only takes 4. In his second main phase, Cole plays a Sunscorched Divide and casts his commander Yuma Proud Protector, letting him now sacrifice a land to draw a card whenever Yuma enters or attacks, and creating a 4/2 Plant Warrior token whenever a desert is put into his graveyard from anywhere. When Yuma enters, Cole sacrifices Conduit Pylons, drawing a card and making a Plant Warrior. Luke plays a mountain and casts Itali Primal Storm, exiling the top card of each player's library whenever it attacks, and letting Luke cast any number of spells exiled this way without paying their mana costs. Then at the end of turn, I activate Riverchurn Monument to mill each of my opponents for 2, and also cast Reality Shift, exiling Summon Ixion, letting Mort manifest the top card of his library, and returning the Mindskinner to play under my control. On my turn, I move straight to combat, attacking Luke for 10 with the Mindskinner, and instead of doing the damage, each of my opponents mill 10 cards. Luckily for Cole, this puts 4 deserts into his graveyard, so he creates 4 Plant Warriors with Yuma. Then in my second main phase, I cast Reenact the Crime, exiling Season of Gathering from Mort's graveyard, copying it and casting a copy for free. This lets me put 2 +1/+1 counters on the Mindskinner and draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures I control, which is 12. After that, I play an island and cast Lightning Greaves, equipping them to Mindskinner to give it Shroud and Haste. Mort plays an island and attacks me for 6 with Falco and the Witness, drawing 2 cards. Then, in his second main phase, he casts Dreamtide Whale, which has Vanishing 2, and lets him proliferate whenever a player casts their second spell each turn. Then, he removes a +1/+1 counter from Falco to cast the Great Henge, which can tap for 2 green mana and let him gain 2 life, while also letting him draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on each creature he controls that enters, and since this is his second spell of the turn, he also proliferates. After that, he adapts the Evolution Witness, gaining 2 life, putting 2 counters on it, and returning Siren Stormtamer from his graveyard to his hand, immediately casting it, and then putting a +1/+1 counter on it, drawing a card, and giving him the chance to sacrifice the Siren to counter a spell or ability that targets him or his permanents. At the end of turn, Cole activates Dune Chanter, milling 2 cards and making a Plant Warrior and gaining a life, since he milled a land. On Cole's turn, he moves straight to combat, attacking me for 6 with Yuma, sacrificing a Plains, drawing a card, and making another Plant Warrior. Then, in his second main phase, he casts Nantuko Cultivator, discarding 3 lands from his hand, drawing 3 cards, putting 3 +1/+1 counters on the Cultivator, making 3 Plant Warrior tokens. Then, he plays a Forest and passes. Luke cast a Wall of Stolen Identity, entering as a copy of my Mindskinner and preventing my commander from untapping for as long as the wall is in play. This allows him to attack Mort with a Tali, putting a +1/+1 counter on it, exiling the top card of each player's deck, and being able to cast them for free. This has him casting a Fire Diamond, Rampaging Baloths, which now lets him create a 4/4 Beast token whenever land enters under his control, Hardened Scales, putting an additional +1/+1 counter on his creatures whenever they would have a +1/+1 counter put on them, and Chrome Host's Seed Shark, incubating X whenever he casts a non-creature spell, where X is the mana value of that spell. Then, Mort blocks a Tali with his Manifest creature, killing it. In Luke's second main phase, he plays a Dismal Backwater, gaining a life and creating a 4/4 Beast token, and we also realize at this point that Mort should have proliferated with Dreamtide Whale, so we resolve that at this point, and Mort returns Bulwark Ox from his graveyard to his hand thanks to Evolution Witness. On my turn, I play an island and cast Coveted Jewel, drawing 3 cards when it enters, and letting any player gain control of it whenever they attack me with an unblocked creature, untapping it and drawing 3 cards. Once that's resolved, I also cast Propaganda, now making any player pay 2 mana per creature to attack me. This triggers Dreamtide Whale, so Mort proliferates and returns Vega the Watcher from his graveyard to his hand. In Mort's upkeep, he removes a time counter from his whale, then casts Railway Brawler, putting a +1/+1 counter on it, drawing a card, gaining 2 life, and now putting X +1/+1 counters on each creature he controls when it enters, where X is its power. After that, he casts Bulwark Ox, which enters with a total of 4 +1/+1 counters, draws Mort a card, and can be sacrificed to give his creatures with counters hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn. On cast, he also proliferates, returning Summon Yojimbo from his graveyard to his hand. Finally, he attacks Luke for 3 with Falco, attacks me for 7 with Evolution Witness, paying 2 mana, and gaining control of Coveted Jewel, untapping it and drawing 3. Then Luke blocks with the Seed Shark, taking a shield counter off Falco but taking no damage while I take 7. In his second main phase, Mort casts Wild Growth, enchanting Command Tower, so it taps for an additional green mana, then also cast Wolf Willow Haven, enchanting the Command Tower, so it taps for yet another additional green mana. At the end of turn, Cole activates Dune Chanter, milling himself for 2, gaining 2 life and making 2 Plant Warrior tokens, since both of the cards were lands. On Cole's turn, he pays 2 to attack me with Yuma for 6, sacrificing a Chef at Dunes, drawing a card and making a Plant Warrior, and attacks Mort with all of his Plant Warriors for 48 total damage. Meaning that even though Mort blocks 4 of the plants, killing them, he still takes 32 damage while I take 6. Cole also gains control of the Coveted Jewel, untapping it and drawing 3. Then in his second main phase, Cole casts Thrilling Discovery, gaining 2 life, discarding 2 cards, and drawing 3. Notably, he discards a land, so he also makes one more plant warrior, then plays a forest. Luke plays a swamp and casts Bastion of Remembrance, creating a 1/1 human soldier token and now making each opponent lose a life while he gains a life whenever one of his creatures dies. He then attacks Cole with Rampaging Baloths, a beast token, and Chrome Host Seed Shark, putting 2+1/+1 counters on each of them, and also attacks Mort for 8 with Atali. Before the Atali trigger resolves, Cole casts Harrow, sacrificing a forest to search his library for 2 basic lands, putting them into play and making another plant warrior. Then, Atali's trigger resolves, exiling the top card of each player's library, letting Luke cast a Blackblade Reforged and Dimir Signet, but not casting Wreck and Rebuild or a forest. This allows Mort to proliferate, returning Summon Knights of the Round from his graveyard to his hand, and finally Mort blocks with Siren Stormtamer, killing it while Cole takes the full 16, meaning all of Luke's opponents mill 16 instead of Cole taking the damage. Notably, this mills over 7 lands for Cole, so he makes another 7 plant warrior tokens. In Luke's second main phase, he casts Kiora Bests the Sea God, creating an 8/8 Kraken with hexproof. Then, at the end of turn, I use River Churn Monument to mill each of my opponents for 2, hitting yet another land for Cole, so he makes yet another plant warrior token. On my turn, I play an island, then cast Tasha's Hideous Laughter, making each of my opponents exile cards from the top of their libraries until they exile 20 or more mana value worth of spells. Then, I activate the exhaust ability of River Churn Monument, milling each opponent equal to the number of cards in their graveyards. Importantly, this puts Mort down to only 2 cards left in his library, while Cole mills his entire library. In Mort's upkeep, he removes a time counter from Dreamtide Whale, plays an Exotic Orchard, then casts Summon Bahamut, destroying his own Enduring Curiosity when it enters the battlefield, gaining 2 life, drawing a card, and putting a total of 10 +1/+1 counters on it. Then he casts Strength of the Harvest, enchanting Falco, to give him +1/+1 for each creature and enchantment he controls, currently giving it +9/+9. He also proliferates and returns Luminous Broodmoth from his graveyard to his hand. Unfortunately for Mort though, Luke has an answer, countering the Strength of the Harvest, so Mort only gets the Broodmoth. Finally, Mort equips Falco with Crystal Fragments, giving it +1/+1, and then moves to combat, attacking Luke with his entire board. But, before the damage can happen, Mort gains control of the Coveted Jewel, untapping it and drawing 3 cards, knocking himself out of the game since he has no cards left in his library. Notably, this means that I regain control of the Coveted Jewel and Luke loses everything he controls that is owned by Mort. At the end step, knowing he's about to draw from an empty library and lose, Cole sacrifices all 7 of his lands to gain 14 life and make 7 more plant warriors. Then he draws for his turn and is knocked out of the game, taking all of his permanents that Luke controls with him. In Luke's first main phase, Kiora Best the Sea God triggers, tapping all non-land permanents I control and preventing them from untapping on my next untap step. He equips Atali with Blackblade Reforged, giving it +8/+8 since he controls 8 lands, then pays 8 total mana to attack me with Atali, 2 beast tokens, and a Kraken for 35 damage. However, since he still controls a copy of the Mindskinner, I don't take the damage and instead mill 35. He also triggers Atali, exiling an island and a Winged Boots, casting the boots, but before we move to blocks, I decide to cast March of Swirling Mists for X=4, exiling Undead Alchemist and Urza Lord High Artificer from my hand. This phases out Marchesa and all the attackers except the Kraken, meaning Luke reclaims the Coveted Jewel, untaps it, draws 3 cards, and I mill 8. On my turn, I cast Flow of Knowledge, drawing 8 cards because I control 8 islands, then discarding 2, and after that I play an island and pass. In Luke's first main phase, Kiora Best the Sea God triggers, letting him gain control of my propaganda, and he sacrifices the Saga. Then he plays a high market and uses it to sacrifice his wall of stolen identities, gaining 2 life and I lose 1. He then attacks me with his entire board, now being able to do damage, but before the damage I cast Aetherize to return all attacking creatures to their owner's hands. Etali does still trigger though, so Luke exiles a mountain and a commander sphere, casting the commander sphere. He immediately sacrifices the sphere to draw a card, hoping to find an answer to the Aetherize, but he's unable to find anything, so all of his attacking creatures return to his hand. In his second main phase, Luke recasts Etali and Marchesa, then also cast Immersturm Predator, which can sacrifice a creature to tap itself, gain indestructible until the end of turn, and exile target card from a graveyard whenever it becomes tapped. On my turn, I play an island and attack Luke for 12 with Mindskinner, paying 2 for propaganda and milling him for 12. I also reclaim the coveted jewel, untapping it and drawing 3. Luke plays a Bojuka Bog, exiling my graveyard, and attacks me for 9 with Etali and Marchesa, triggering Etali to cast Maddening Cacophony, milling me for 8, and cast Vona's Hunger, making me sacrifice half of my creatures rounded up, killing Mindskinner. Then he gains control of the coveted jewel, untaps it, and draws 3. Before damage, I cast Blue Sun Zenith for X equals 7, targeting myself to draw 7 cards. Unfortunately, nothing I find saves me in this situation, so I take 9 damage, getting knocked out, and winning Luke the game. Alright, so that was a sweet game. Honestly, that was one of the most fun games I've played in quite a long time. Being able to see everyone's deck kind of just pop off was very, very cool to see. It was nice that we still kind of participated in the game, even though we did have our commander shut down for quite a bit of it, or removed, or just shuffled back in. We really could not stick the Mindskinner, and we only got to attack with it a couple of times. But even though we only attacked with it a couple of times, we were still able to mill out 2 players at the table, which I think is a huge success for this deck. And yes, part of that came off of the back of Luke stealing our Mindskinner and then him milling people for about 16 or so cards, but it still did what it wanted to do, and it played a big role in the game, and I had a ton of fun. Mono Blue Voltron is one of my personal favorites. I have a personal Fibblethip Voltron deck that I absolutely love, so I really enjoyed playing this game. Moving around the table, talking about our opponents though, Mort, his deck was very, very cool. It was really sweet to see all of the Saga synergies, where he could proliferate, put a counter on his Sagas, trigger them at instant speed, then remove a counter from them, keep them in play, cast stuff from the top of his library. I think that that's one of those decks that if you let it go unchecked, probably just runs away with the game, especially because he had plenty of ways to get stuff back. We saw the Evolution Witness do a ton of work in that game, so very impressive. I really enjoyed the Falco Spara deck, and hopefully I'll get to play against it again in the future. Moving on to Cole, who was definitely the threat for most of the game, being able to drop just an absolute ton of plant warriors onto the board, which admittedly we helped him get to, but I think that it was still powerful when combined with Dune Chanter, where everything was a desert, so no matter what he hit for lands, he got to make the plant warriors. And I think that if he had had just maybe one more turn, he could have done an absolutely absurd amount of damage to the table. And if he'd had just a single card left in his deck on his final turn, he definitely could have knocked us all out with one massive swing. So we were just barely ahead of the curve on that one. And then finally, we have our winner of the game, Luke, who had an amazing showing, being able to steal a bunch of different things with Etali, being able to put them to good use and just keep swinging, being able to shut down our commander, which even though it had a Lightning Greaves on it, the Wall of Stolen Identity doesn't actually target, which I thought was a super cool way to shut down a commander that really you may not have been able to otherwise. So obviously I don't want to say that I still won the game, but I'd like to say that since a deck I built won the game in the very capable hands of Luke, it's still kind of a win. Overall though, Let me know what you thought of the game. Let me know what you thought of the deck. Are there any cards that I missed? Any cards that maybe shouldn't be in the deck? I would love to hear any arguments for that. And as always, if you have suggestions, please put those in the comments below, and I will do my best to get to them as soon as I can. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and I will see you all on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.